What in God's name are you doing with my daughter?" These words tore through the air like a clap of thunder. William Everett stood at the entrance to his kitchen, his jaw clenched, his chest heaving, and his pupils wide with alarm. His expensive briefcase slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud, but he didn't even notice. In that brief moment, his mind conjured every dreadful scenario imaginable. All he could perceive, all he could focus on, was his 3-year-old daughter, naked in a plastic tub within the kitchen sink, and the woman hired to clean floors and fold laundry, hunched over her with her hands on his child's body. A wave of panic overwhelmed him. His throat constricted, his body stiffened. For a terrifying instant, his mind failed to process concepts of tenderness or care. It only saw threat, violation, and danger. "Get away from her!" he barked, his voice raw and sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Maida?" Naomi slowly looked up, her eyes wide but composed, as if she had already anticipated this very moment. "She had a fever, sir," she said softly. "She was burning up, crying for hours. This is a remedy my mama used, and hers before her. A warm bath in a confined space calms the nerves, brings the fever down." William stepped forward, his face contorting with each word she uttered. "Oh, please spare me the folklore," he snapped. "A maid soaking my child like some barn animal in a kitchen sink. Is that the standard where you're from? You think this is a back porch in Mississippi?" Naomi's mouth slightly parted, stung. "This isn't about where I'm from." "Oh, yes, it is," William hissed. "This isn't some run-down shack in the South. This is my home, my daughter. And you? You're here to clean, not to play mother with your country tricks and old wives' tales." Naomi's face fell. Her arms, still wet from bathing the child, trembled slightly, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself again, not this time. "I wasn't playing mother," she said, barely audible. "I was trying to help her." Laya, oblivious to the emotional tempest raging above her, giggled and splashed water at the cabinet. "Daddy, look, I'm taking a bath. Mimi says I'm a fish." William's chest heaved. The word Mimi struck him like a slap. Naomi turned back to the child, lifted her out of the water with a towel. Her movements were now trembling. She gently kissed the little girl's forehead before swaddling her tightly. "I want you gone before sundown," William said, his voice cold and resolute. "Leave your keys with Luther. You're lucky I don't press charges for this." Naomi froze in place for a moment, and then the dam broke. She clutched the towel tighter, tears streaming down her cheeks as she turned away, silent at first. But then a sob escaped her lips, raw, painful, honest. She didn't beg, she didn't argue. She only whispered, "Yes, sir," as if swallowing every ounce of pride just to get the words out. Laya reached out as Naomi walked away, squirming in her father's arms. "No, Mimi, don't go. I want Mimi." William didn't reply. His arms tightened around his daughter. Naomi's figure vanished down the hall. Hours later, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. William sat in the den, the fireplace unlit, an untouched whiskey beside him. Luther, the houseman who had served the Everetts for over 3 decades, stood silently by the doorway. "She cried, you know," Luther said. "Finally, all the way out the door." William didn't look up. "She crossed a line. She saved your daughter a hospital trip. She bathed her in the sink," William replied, still unable to release his anger. "She calmed her," Luther corrected. "What you saw as offense, that child saw as safety." William sharply exhaled. He picked up the remote and accessed the security footage. Kitchen camera timestamp, 2:34 p.m. There it was. Naomi gently lifting Laya, whispering into her ear as the child whimpered in distress, testing the water, carefully pouring it over her tiny back, singing softly, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." His wife's lullaby. His throat clenched, his fingers paused the screen. He remembered the scarf, pale yellow silk still folded on the hallway table. Naomi had left it behind. He had picked it up earlier. Now he brought it to his face again. The scent of lavender and something sweet. Cinnamon, not perfume. Something maternal, something familiar. Laya had stopped crying hours ago. She slept soundly now, breathing evenly. Her fever was gone. He looked at the footage again. The way Naomi's hands held Laya. The way she looked at her, not with obligation, but with genuine care. And then the words he'd thrown at her echoed back in his mind. Barn animal, shack, folklore. He hadn't just dismissed her method, he'd dismissed her humanity. And for the first time that day, not out of pride, not out of duty, but something else entirely, William Evere began to feel ashamed. The house had never felt so still. Not in the months after Evelyn's passing, not during long business trips that left the mansion hollow for weeks. But tonight, after Naomi left, something deeper settled into the walls, an emptiness that scraped against William's nerves like sandpaper. He sat at the edge of his daughter's bed, watching her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell in a soft, even rhythm. A cool, damp cloth rested on her forehead, and her stuffed bunny, Evie, named after her mother, was tucked under her arm. Laya had stopped crying shortly after Naomi left. William had rocked her gently, whispered awkward comforts, but it wasn't his words that calmed her. It was exhaustion or surrender. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her skin was warm, but no longer burning. Her cheeks held a faint pink hue instead of the frightening flush from earlier. A part of him wanted to believe it was the Tylenol he'd given her. Another part, one harder to silence, wondered if Naomi's folk remedy had truly done something he couldn't. He exhaled and stood up quietly, pulling the door closed behind him. The hallway light cast long shadows on the hardwood floor as he moved toward the study. Halfway there, he paused. The scarf. It still sat where he'd left it on the side table beside the vase of dried lilies Naomi had arranged a few days earlier. She had a way with flowers, simple ones, wild ones. She never asked for permission to bring them in. She just did it. He picked up the scarf again, rubbed it between his fingers. The silk was soft, slightly worn. He wondered how long she'd had it. Maybe it had belonged to her mother. Folk remedy, he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as if trying to dismiss the memory of her explanation. Still, it lingered. She hadn't spoken defensively, hadn't raised her voice or thrown blame. She had simply said it was something her mother taught her, as if that alone should have made it worthy. He tossed the scarf gently back onto the table and went into the study. Luther was already there, sitting in his usual leather armchair with a glass of sweet tea, like he had every evening for the past 25 years. "I see the storm's past," Luther said, not looking up from his crossword. William poured himself a drink and sat across from him. "She's asleep," William said. Luther nodded once. "That girl's got a strong spirit." William glanced at him. "Laya?" "No," Luther said. "Naomi?" William didn't answer. Luther set the crossword down and fixed his gaze on William. "You know, I raised 3 daughters, all grown now, and I've seen every kind of caretaker come through this house. Some show up for a paycheck, some show up out of guilt. Naomi, she shows up like it's her calling." William scoffed lightly. "Her calling? She's a maid." "No, sir." Luther leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "She's a woman who took a job cleaning houses because life didn't give her the chance to finish nursing school. You never asked her why she left her program. Never even knew she was in one, did you?" William blinked. Luther's voice lowered, firm but respectful. "You see a maid. I see someone who's been keeping your daughter whole while you've been keeping the company afloat. You can fire her all you want, but don't pretend she didn't hold this family together better than most bloodkin would." The words stung more because they were true than because they were harsh. William stared into his glass, amber liquid, ice melting slowly. The silence stretched. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "Where is she staying?" Luther raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "I want to make sure she gets her final check," William replied quickly, "and her scarf." Luther gave a slow nod, as if he saw through the excuse, but chose not to call it out. "She's probably at her grandmother's in South Hill. Last I heard, the old woman wasn't doing too well. Naomi goes back there whenever she needs to reset." "Well," William stood, "get me an address." "You going to drive out there?" Luther asked. William hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, tomorrow." Luther gave a soft chuckle. "Well, make sure you bring more than a check and a scarf. That girl deserves more than silence." William didn't respond. He left the study and returned to the hallway, his mind churning. Later that night, he opened his laptop, something he rarely did after 10 twice. He typed in Naomi Carter. There wasn't much, just a few tagged photos on social media, a LinkedIn page that hadn't been updated since 2019. But one link caught his eye, a scholarship listing from Seattle Community College. Naomi Carter, recipient of the Future Healer Grant. There was a smiling photo of her, younger but unmistakable, in a white coat holding a stethoscope. Her bio mentioned her plans to become a pediatric nurse, her passion for low-income communities, her work with children. The last update on the page was a simple line: "Program paused indefinitely due to family emergency." William stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in the silence. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. How many stories like hers had he overlooked in his own company, in his house, on the street? People quietly carrying more than they ever let on. People he judged in seconds. He thought of his daughter's laugh echoing off the tile as she splashed in the sink. Then he thought of Naomi's face as she left, wet with tears, humiliated and still holding herself with grace. And for the first time in years, William Evere wasn't thinking about his stock portfolio or his product launch or his next strategic move. He was thinking about what it meant to owe someone, not with money but with decency. If you feel the same compassion for Naomi in this moment, he'd like to support her. And don't forget to comment where you're watching this video from. Who knows? Maybe someone close to you is watching it too. He stood again, walked quietly to Laya's room, and peeked inside. She was still asleep, the fever gone. "Mama, Mimi," she murmured in her dreams. William felt something tighten in his chest. He closed the door gently behind him and whispered to the empty hallway, as if Naomi could hear, "I'm sorry." The next morning broke with gray skies and a steady drizzle tapping softly against the mansion's windows. William Evere stood in front of the bathroom mirror, razor in hand, but hadn't touched his face. His reflection stared back unshaven, tired, but alert in a way he hadn't been for months. He'd hardly slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Naomi's tear-streaked face as she turned away from him. Her voice, calm and steady at first, had cracked under the weight of his words. Words soaked in pride, in prejudice, in pain he hadn't yet faced himself. Now that pain lingered like a fog around him. Downstairs, Luther was already moving about the kitchen. The smell of percolating coffee filled the air, strong, dark, southern. William patted down the stairs in socks and silence. "She's with her grandmother," Luther said before William could ask. "South Hill. I called in a favor, got the address." He slid a small folded paper across the counter. William nodded and took it. "I'll be back before dinner," he said. "You sure you're ready for that conversation?" Luther asked, not looking up from the cast-iron skillet he was seasoning. "I'm not sure of anything right now," William replied. "But I know I was wrong, and I know my daughter misses her." Luther gave a short grunt of approval. "Then take her scarf and your humility." The drive to South Hill took just under an hour. William left the city behind, the glass and steel giving way to low buildings, corner shops, and telephone poles laced with weathered wires. He passed a row of aging bungalows with rusted mailboxes and creaking porches. It wasn't poverty, it was history, time worn into brick and wood. He parked across the street from a pale yellow house with chipped siding and a rose bush clinging stubbornly to the porch rail. There were no cars in the driveway. A wind chimes rang faintly under the eaves, out of tune, but oddly beautiful. He hesitated. The scarf sat folded on the passenger seat beside him, wrapped neatly in a brown paper bag. He took it, stepped out, and crossed the street. The screen door creaked as he knocked. A moment later, the door cracked open, and a woman in her 80s peered out. She wore a shawl and a skeptical expression. "Help you?" she asked. William cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Naomi Carter." The woman's eyes narrowed.
Depends on who's asking. My name is William Evere. He stopped, rethought. I'm her former employer. I came to return something she left behind. The door opened wider. She's in the back, the woman said. Come in, but take off your shoes. Carpet ain't what it used to be, but I keep it clean. William complied, stepping into the house and removing his polished loafers. The living room was modest, filled with old photographs and floral upholstery. A worn Bible sat open on the coffee table. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and menthol. She didn't say anything about expecting company, the woman called as she shuffled down the hallway. But maybe that's 'cause she didn't expect you. Moments later, Naomi appeared at the end of the hall. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes swollen from crying or lack of sleep, maybe both. She wore a faded college sweatshirt and jeans. She stopped cold when she saw him.
"What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and caution. "I came to return this," he said, holding out the bag. "Your scarf." And I hesitated. "And what?" she said, arms crossed over her chest. William looked down, then back up. "And to say, I'm sorry." Naomi didn't move. "For what exactly?" she asked. "Calling me a backwater maid, accusing me of harming your child, humiliating me in front of a 3-year-old I love like my own." Her words struck him like stones, each one deserved. William nodded slowly. "For all of it," he said, "I was wrong. I was angry, scared, maybe, but none of that excuses what I said or how I said it." She stepped forward and took the bag from his hands, her fingers briefly brushing his. The touch jolted him, not with romance, but with something deeper, recognition, humanity. "I shouldn't have had to explain myself," she said. "I shouldn't have had to defend caring for a sick child in a house where no one else was there for her." "I know," he said. There was a pause. "My wife used to sing that song," he added softly. "You are my sunshine. Laya hasn't smiled like that since the funeral, and I didn't realize it until I watched the footage." Naomi blinked, surprised. "You watched it?" "I wanted proof you were wrong," he said. "Instead, I found proof I was." Her eyes welled again, but this time with something other than pain. "I didn't mean to overstep," she said. I saw myself in her, scared, burning up, alone." William's voice lowered. "You mentioned your mama used to do that. The bath?" Naomi nodded. "Boiled water, sink, towel on the floor. That's how she cooled us down when the clinics were closed and the bills were due. She did what she could. I learned from her." He looked at her, really looked, and saw someone far more than a title on a payroll. "Naomi," he said, "would you consider coming back? Not as a maid, as Laya's caregiver, and more than that. I want to sponsor you back to school, nursing, if you still want it." She stared at him, stunned. "I know I can't undo what I said," he continued, "but maybe I can help you do what you were meant to do." Naomi wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I'll think about it," she said. "I'm not ready to say yes, but I appreciate you saying it to my face." "That's fair," William said. "Take your time." As he turned to leave, the old woman from earlier called from the kitchen. "You want to stay for sweet tea, Mr. Everett?" Might help that tight jaw loosen up some. William chuckled. Another time, ma'am, but thank you. He stepped back into the rain, lighter somehow. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. William Evere wasn't a man accustomed to waiting. In the boardroom, hesitation cost millions. In his world, silence was weakness, and time was leverage.
But as he sat alone in the grand kitchen of his mansion the following afternoon, staring at the pale yellow scarf folded neatly beside his coffee mug, he realized he had no control here, not anymore.
Naomi hadn't given him an answer. Not a no, not a yes, just, I'll think about it. And now the waiting was more unbearable than he'd expected. He looked around the kitchen, the same kitchen that had felt like a battlefield only 2 days before. The sink was dry now, the plastic tub gone. The only sign of the event that had turned his world on its head was the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the air. Footsteps echoed down the stairs, light, rapid, joyful. Laya burst into the room in a blur of pink pajamas and tangled blonde curls. "Daddy, where's Mimi?" she asked, climbing into his lap without invitation. William flinched. There it was again. Mimi, as natural on her tongue as any other word she'd learned, as if the woman who'd raised her for a year was family, and in Laya's mind, she was. "She's visiting her grandma, sweetheart," William said carefully. "Why?" Laya frowned. "Did she get sick like me?" He swallowed. "No, she's okay. Just needed some time." Laya rested her head against his chest and became quiet. For a child with an attention span as brief as a hummingbird's breath, her silence was telling. "I want her to come back," she said finally. "I miss her songs." William held her a little tighter. "I do too." Later that evening, William stepped into Laya's room with a book in hand. For the first time since Evelyn died, he was making an effort to read the bedtime story himself. No nannies, no housekeepers, no screens. He read slowly, sometimes stumbling over words made awkward by emotion. But Laya didn't care. She clung to every word, even if her eyelids drooped with sleep. When the story ended, she yawned and whispered, "You're not Mimi, but you're trying." William smiled despite himself. "Yeah, I am." He kissed her forehead and turned off the lamp as he pulled the door nearly closed behind him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked the screen. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello, it's Naomi." His breath caught. He stepped into the hallway away from the nursery. "Naomi, thank you for calling back." "I've been thinking," she said, "about your offer, about Laya." William waited. "I'll come back," she said, "but only on 2 conditions." "Name them." "First," she said, "I'm not coming back as help. I want a contract, a real one. Nanny and pediatric aide, not maid." "Done," William said without hesitation. "And second, I go back to school. You help cover tuition." "Yes," he said, "that's what I wanted to offer from the start." There was silence on the line, then a soft exhale. "All right," she said. "I'll be there tomorrow morning, but William, we're not going back to the way things were. If I see anything that feels wrong again, anything demeaning, I won't stay quiet." "I don't want you to," he said. "You've earned your voice, and I need to hear it." Another pause. "Good night, Mr. Everett." "Good night, Naomi." He ended the call, slid the phone into his pocket, and stood in the hallway for a long moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, something in the house shifted. Not in the walls, not in the furniture, but in the air, in him. The next morning, Laya was up before the sun, too excited to sleep. She sat at the breakfast table, feet swinging wildly, chewing on a piece of dry toast. "Is Mimi coming today?" William nodded. "Yes, she'll be here soon." "When she comes, can we bake cookies?" Laya asked. "She knows how to make the kind with the rainbow chips." Well, ask her," William said, pouring himself a cup of coffee he hadn't needed nearly as much as he did today. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. William moved quickly, but Laya was faster. She leaped from her seat and dashed through the hallway, arms outstretched, yelling, "Mimi!" Naomi stood on the front step, dressed simply in a blue cardigan, jeans, and white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and in her hand was a small lunch tote. Laya barreled into her, wrapping tiny arms around Naomi's waist with all the force she could muster. Naomi dropped the bag and bent down, hugging her back just as tightly. "I missed you so much," Laya whispered. "I missed you too, sunshine," Naomi said, kissing the top of her head. William stood a few feet back, watching. When Naomi looked up at him, her eyes were calm, but not soft. There was still a barrier, and that was okay. "Welcome back," he said. "I'm not back," she corrected gently. "I'm beginning again. There's a difference." William nodded. "Understood." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. "Contract drafted by a friend of mine who's a paralegal. I'd like your lawyer to review it and sign. By end of day, I'll take care of it," he said. Naomi handed Laya the scarf William had returned. "You left this on my table," she said to the child. "Thought it belonged with you." "Huh?" Laya squealed and wrapped it around her neck like a superhero cape. William watched them both, his daughter spinning in circles, Naomi following behind, smiling, and something inside him settled. Maybe redemption didn't come all at once. Maybe it came in the form of small feet on wood floors, of humble returns, of asking, not assuming, of building trust, one morning at a time. By the end of the first week, the rhythms of the Everett household had changed. Not quietly, not subtly, but with deliberate intention. Naomi no longer entered through the back door. She didn't wear a uniform. She didn't ask permission before speaking. And William, he didn't flinch anymore when she disagreed with him. They had drawn new lines. Naomi arrived each morning at precisely 8 a.m., her hair neatly tied back, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder with her coursework, a tablet for Laya's learning activities, and often a jar of something homemade, jam, soup, even banana pudding. She greeted William with a polite, "Morning, Mr. Everett," and he replied with, "Morning, Naomi." No pretense. No awkward small talk, but mutual recognition, mutual respect. Laya thrived in this new world. She laughed more. Her tantrums became less frequent. Her appetite returned, and every night before bed she asked for one of three things: a story from Naomi's childhood, a song, or to be held, just like Mimi used to. One night after Naomi left for the day, William tucked Laya in and asked, "Why do you like her so much?" Laya blinked. "She makes me feel warm." That word lingered in William's mind long after he left the room. Warm. How long had it been since their house felt like that? On Saturday, William invited Naomi to join him and Laya for brunch. At first, she declined. "I'm not a guest," she said gently, but William countered, "You're not the help either." She accepted with one condition: she would cook. By 10 a.m., the kitchen was alive. Naomi was at the stove flipping sweet potato pancakes with practiced ease. Laya sat on the counter, legs swinging, helping slice bananas with a plastic butter knife. William leaned against the door frame, watching. "You always this confident in other people's kitchens?" he asked, folding his arms. Naomi glanced at him over her shoulder. "Only when the owner's proven he can't cook." He smirked. "Fair. Pancakes in 2 minutes," she said, then nodded toward the dining room. "You can set the table." William raised a brow. "You giving me orders now?" "No," she said, smiling slightly. "I'm giving you trust." It was a subtle moment, but it hit him harder than it should have. He set the table. Over brunch, they talked not about business, not about politics, but about life. Naomi told him about her mother, who raised 3 kids while working night shifts at a nursing home. She shared stories of growing up in a house with no central heat, but plenty of laughter. William listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, he surprised himself. He told Naomi about Evelyn, about her cancer diagnosis, about how quickly everything unraveled after that. He admitted he had no idea how to be a single parent, that most days he felt like a fraud wearing a father's suit. Naomi didn't offer advice. She didn't coddle him. She just listened. And for the first time, William realized how rare that was, for someone to hear him without trying to fix him. After brunch, Laya ran off to her room to play, and Naomi started gathering dishes. "You can leave those," William said. "I'll get them." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Really?" He nodded. "Really?" "No," she handed him a plate. Their fingers brushed again. This time, neither of them pulled away. That night, as William walked through the house, turning off lights, he paused by the living room where Luther sat, watching an old Western. "Everything all right, sir?" Luther asked. William nodded. "Better than it's been in a long time?" Luther gestured to the armchair across from him. "Sit a minute." William did. "You're changing," Luther said. William chuckled. "That obvious?" "It's in the way you listen now, the way you move through this house." "Lighter?" William stared at the flickering television. "I didn't know how heavy I'd been carrying things until she walked out that door." Luther nodded slowly. "Sometimes you got to lose something, someone to see how much they were holding up." William looked at him. "Do you think I can fix this?" "You're not broken," Luther said. "But fixing a house isn't about repainting the walls. It's about repairing the foundation. And Naomi, she's been part of that foundation since the day she walked in." William was quiet for a long moment. "She's going back to school. I'm paying for it." Luther smiled. "Then you're not just rebuilding. You're planting something new." William stood, clapped Luther on the shoulder. "Thanks, old man." Luther gave him a look. "Don't get sentimental on me. I still expect sweet potato pancakes next Saturday." Sunday came with unexpected news. Naomi received an email from her nursing school out. "I want Laya to see this, to understand it. That when a woman fights for her future, the world needs to make room." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. Then slowly, she smiled. "Thank you, William." He looked her in the eyes. "No, Naomi, thank you." Outside, the wind rustled the leaves gently. Inside, something else stirred. Trust, hope, a fragile but growing connection. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was something more lasting. The beginning of a partnership built not on roles or status, but on truth. The days slipped into a new rhythm, structured yet soft around the edges. Naomi spent her mornings with Laya, her afternoons attending classes or shadowing at the pediatric clinic, and her evenings reviewing coursework at the kitchen table while William read nearby in the den. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't need to. Silence no longer felt empty between them. But as the house settled into its gentler heartbeat, the outside world began to stir. It started with a letter. William found it tucked in the mailbox one Friday morning amid business correspondence and subscription magazines. The envelope was thick, off-white, with a return address from the private academy where Laya had been pre-registered since birth. An elite, old-money institution nestled in the hills north of Seattle. Inside, the language was polite but pointed. "Dear Mr. Everett, we are writing to confirm Laya Everett's upcoming start date. We understand her primary caregiver, Miss Naomi Carter, has been identified as a part-time guardian during your working hours. While we respect your decisions as a parent, we kindly ask for confirmation that Miss Carter meets the Academy's expectations for conduct, background, and presentation in line with our institutional standards." The letter went on, its wording vague but unmistakably patronizing. William folded it slowly and set it aside, jaw tight. That night, after Naomi had tucked Laya into bed and returned to her coursework at the kitchen table, he handed her the letter without comment. She read it slowly, carefully, and then placed it down without a word. "I'm not surprised," she said finally. William frowned. You shouldn't have to expect this, not in 2025, not in this city. Naomi gave him a tired look. This city's got money. Money doesn't erase fear. William, sometimes it hides it in thicker curtains. This is a... He looked at her, unsure what to say. Do you want me to step back? She asked. The question struck him like a slap. No, he said firmly. Absolutely not. Naomi nodded, folding the letter and tucking it back in the envelope. Then you'll have to decide how much noise you're willing to make. Because if Laya walks into that school with me by her side, some people are going to whisper, others might shout, and not everyone will unspoken traditions. You want my opinion? Meredith said after hearing the story. Pull Laya out of that school. They don't deserve her. It's not that simple, William replied. Evelyn wanted her there. Evelyn also wanted a world where her daughter would be judged by her mind, not by who's holding her hand on the way in. If that school can't handle a caregiver who doesn't fit their country club mold, maybe it's the wrong mold. He sighed. Laya needs consistency. I've already disrupted her enough. You didn't disrupt her, Will. Life did. Evelyn's death did. But you've made a home again. And from what it sounds like, Naomi helped you do that. Don't let a bunch of donors and pearl clutchers undo what matters. He was quiet for a long moment. Thanks, Miri. Send me pictures of Laya soon, she said, and tell Naomi I said thank you for not quitting on your stubborn behind. Sunday afternoon, William and Naomi took Laya to the park. It was the first warm day in weeks, and the city shimmered with golden light and soft breezes. Children squealed across the playground, chasing kites and bubbles. Naomi sat on a bench beneath a birch tree, sketching out a study plan in her notebook. William returned from the vendor cart with 2 lemonades and a grape ice pop for Laya, who was on the swings, giggling at a dog chasing its own tail. Here, he said, handing Naomi the drink. Thanks, she replied, scribbling something in the margin before looking up. Did you think more about the letter? I did. He took a sip of lemonade, watching Laya from the corner of his eye. I want you to walk her into that school, he said. Naomi raised her eyebrows. I want them to see exactly who's helping raise my daughter, and if they have a problem with it, they can take it up with me. Naomi studied him. That's going to cause a stir. Let it. She smiled, but it faded just as quickly. Are you ready for what that really means? She asked. For the stares, the articles, the assumptions, they'll call it a scandal before they call it a success. William looked her in the eyes. I'm ready for my daughter to know what courage looks like, and it starts with the people she trusts standing tall, no matter who's watching. Naomi didn't reply, but she closed her notebook and leaned back on the bench. Her face turned toward the sun. That evening, Laya stood between them in the hallway, holding both their hands. Can I wear my purple dress on my first day? She asked. Of course, Naomi said. It's your favorite. And will you walk me in, Mimi? Not just Daddy? Naomi glanced at William. He nodded. I'll be right beside you, Naomi said. And no more being sick, okay? Laya added. No more baths in the sink. Naomi laughed. Deal. As they tucked her into bed and turned out the lights, William lingered by the door. She's going to be okay, he whispered. Naomi looked back at him from the hallway. She already is. And as the door clicked shut, William realized something quietly profound. They were no longer living in reaction to a loss. They were building toward something better. Laya's first day at the academy came sooner than expected. The air that morning carried the crispness of early spring sunlight catching on dewdrops. The streets washed clean by overnight rain. Naomi arrived at the Everett home in a light gray blazer over a pale yellow blouse, the same color as the scarf William had once returned to her. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a statement, but it was deliberate. Inside, Laya twirled around the entryway in her purple dress, arms outstretched like a ballerina. I'm ready, she shouted with glee. William smiled from the staircase, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look like royalty." "I feel like cotton candy," Laya beamed, holding Naomi's hand. William chuckled and grabbed his keys. "Let's get moving before she starts levitating." They drove in silence for a moment, Naomi in the back with Laya, William at the wheel. His hands gripped the steering wheel a bit tighter than usual. The weight of what this day meant, not just for Laya, but for all three of them, settled into his chest. As they turned into the academy's long, circular driveway, William spotted it immediately. The cluster of parents outside the front entrance, pearls, loafers, pressed suits, polished and poised like they were stepping into a country club. The moment the Everett's car pulled up, heads began to turn. He parked slowly. "Ready?" Naomi asked Laya, her voice even. Laya nodded. "Mimi, will you hold my hand?" "I'll do better," Naomi said. "We'll walk in together." William stepped out and moved to open the back door. Naomi exited with Laya beside her, and the three of them walked as one unit, father, daughter, and the woman who had carried them both through more storms than either would admit. As they approached the steps, William heard it. Whispers, low, careful, sharpened like blades hidden behind smiles. "That's the nanny, right?" "Well, that's bold. Thought he'd hired someone new after the incident." William felt Naomi stiffen slightly, but she didn't falter. Laya gripped her hand tightly and smiled up at her. "Do I look brave?" she asked. Naomi glanced down and whispered, "Braver than most." They reached the registration table. The admissions coordinator, a woman in her 50s with a tight bun and tighter smile, barely looked up. "Last name?" "Everett," William said, stepping forward. The woman scanned her list. "Ah, yes, Laya." Then her eyes drifted to Naomi. There was a pause, barely a second, but it stretched with meaning. "And this is—" Naomi didn't wait for William to speak. "I'm Naomi Carter," she said. "Laya's caregiver. I'll be walking her to class today." The woman's smile faltered for a moment, then snapped back into place. "Of course. Well, classroom B3, just down the corridor." William caught the flicker in the woman's eyes. Confusion, resistance, something harder to name. He said nothing, just nodded and led the way. Inside, the classroom buzzed with children and bright bulletin boards. Laya ran to her cubby, placing her bag and lunchbox down like a pro. She hugged Naomi tightly. Then William. "I love you both," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Naomi blinked fast, steadying her voice. "We love you too, sunshine. Always." William crouched beside her. "You're going to have a great day, and if anyone gives you trouble, remember what Mommy used to say." Laya tilted her head. "About peanut butter?" "No," he smiled. "About being kind and brave, even when it's hard." She grinned. "Okay." With that, she skipped off toward a table full of blocks and glue sticks, already striking up conversation with a new friend. William and Naomi stood in the hallway for a moment longer, the sound of laughter muffled by the door. "That went better than I expected," William said. Naomi exhaled. "That's because you expected a war." He looked at her. "Didn't you?" "I've been fighting that war all my life," she said. This was just another battlefield. They turned to leave, retracing their steps down the corridor. But as they exited the building, William caught sight of two figures standing off to the side of the entrance, Headmaster Whitmore and a board trustee whispering. Their eyes followed Naomi. William stopped mid-step. Naomi noticed. "What is it?" He looked her in the eye. "Stay in the car. I'll be right back." Before she could object, he turned and walked straight toward the two men. "Gentlemen," he said, "if I sense any resistance, any bias, spoken or unspoken, you'll lose more than a donor. You'll lose a father willing to move mountains for his daughter." The trustee's face darkened. Whitmore cleared his throat. "Of course, Mr. Everett. We aim to create an inclusive environment for all. Spare me the brochure talk, William cut in. Respect her or answer to me. He turned and walked away, breath steady but heart pounding. Treetops, Naomi Carter finally felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not just seen, but safe. 2 weeks after Laya's first day at the academy, the story broke. It started with a headline, cleanly stated, dangerously simple. Billionaires live in Nanny Sparks' quiet controversy at prestigious academy. The article was buried on page 7 of a popular society magazine, one of those glossy publications left on coffee tables in law firms and plastic surgeons' offices, but it didn't stay buried for long. By mid-afternoon, breeze was soft. The sun filtered through the magnolia tree overhead. Laya was inside, dancing to a cartoon theme song in the living room. She answered on the second ring. "I saw it," she said before William could speak. "Naomi, Don't," she cut in gently. "I knew this might happen. I just didn't think it would sting this much." He was quiet for a moment. "Come inside, please. Let's talk." 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Between them lay the magazine. Naomi tapped the corner of it with one finger, her expression unreadable. "I knew people would whisper," she said, "but now they've got something louder. A headline." "It's garbage," William said. "Speculative nonsense meant to stir up clicks." "That's not the point," she replied. "You and I both know what they're trying to say without saying it." He leaned back, staring at her. "That there's something inappropriate between us." Naomi nodded. "They're trying to rewrite this story with the same old pen, one that turns women like me into props, problems, or secrets." William's hands tightened into fists. "I can make some calls. Get them to retract it." Naomi shook her head. "You'll just confirm there's something to hide." "So what do we do?" She looked him dead in the eyes. "We don't flinch. We keep showing up. I walk Laya to class like nothing's changed. You look every board member in the face like you owe them nothing, and we keep living the truth." He took a breath. "That sounds noble, but I'm furious." "Good," Naomi said. "Let it burn through the parts of you still trying to be liked." Later that week, Meredith called. "I read it," she said. "And if that woman were white, you know what they'd call her? A devoted caregiver healing a grieving family. But because she's black, they throw around words like influence and impropriety." William pinched the bridge of his nose. "You think I should make a public statement?" "No," Meredith said. "You make a public life. Take Laya and Naomi out in the open. Walk into a fundraiser with them. Let the world see what real family looks like when it doesn't fit their mold." He paused. "You'd come with us?" "I'd be front row," she said, "and I'd bring my best pearls." The opportunity came sooner than expected. The Academy's spring gala, a black tie fundraiser, was announced with all the expected fanfare. Formal attire, wine sponsors, a silent auction. Attendance was strongly encouraged for high-tier donor families. Naomi hesitated when William brought it up. "I'm not sure I belong in that room," she said. "You belong wherever Laya smiles," he replied, "and she wants you there." Naomi looked at her reflection in the hall mirror later that night. She saw the creases at the corners of her eyes, the slight wear on her knuckles, the callus near her palm from years of lifting other people's children. She saw everything they'd try to minimize and everything she refused to shrink. The night of the gala, she wore deep navy blue, not flashy, but elegant, quiet power. Her curls were pulled back, and a silver pin, her mother's, rested near her collarbone. When William saw her step out of the car, he paused, not out of attraction, though she was beautiful, but out of reverence, like he was witnessing someone step fully into the space they'd been denied too long. Meredith joined them inside the hall, linking arms with Naomi like they were old friends. The looks they received ranged from confused to cold to covertly curious. but no one said a word until one did. A woman in a sequined gown approached Naomi near the hors d'oeuvres table. Her smile was too wide, her voice too saccharine. "I just had to say, you're so brave, dear. Truly, it's wonderful how you've integrated so seamlessly." Naomi blinked. "Integrated?" "Yes, with Laya and the family. It's admirable. Not everyone would know how to handle the attention." Naomi stared at her a moment longer than comfort allowed, then leaned in just slightly. "I'm not part of the wallpaper," she said calmly. "I help raise the girl, and if people are uncomfortable with that, maybe it's their seams that need adjusting." The woman flushed. "Of course. I didn't mean—" "But you did," Naomi said, then turned and walked away. William, who had been watching nearby, stepped beside her. "You handled that better than I would have." She glanced up at him. "It's not the first time. Won't be the last." They stood at the edge of the ballroom, the music soft behind them, the chandelier glittering above like a sky of old judgment. "I want to do more," William said suddenly. "For you, for Laya, for other women in this city who've been erased before they even had a chance." Naomi looked at him, unsure. "What are you saying?" "I want to start something," he said. "A foundation, scholarships, support systems, for caregivers, for single mothers, for women trying to get degrees while carrying the weight of the world." Naomi blinked. "William, I can write checks." "Sure," he continued, "but I want to build something with a face. Yours, mine, Laya's." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. 2 days after the gala, Naomi found herself sitting alone on a bench in Jefferson Park, a thin folder resting on her lap. Inside it were printed documents, a proposed mission statement, budget projections, and a vision outline for the Everett Foundation. William had delivered them the night before, saying, "Just read it. Don't say yes, just read." And she had, twice. It was everything she dreamed of building during her long nights as a nursing student. A space where women of color could access quality childcare while attending school. Programs for financial literacy, professional mentorship, even mental health support. It was comprehensive, ambitious, expensive, and it had her name, Naomi Carter, right under program director. She felt like she was holding a key, and behind the door it opened was a world no one like her had been allowed to build, not yet. But she was afraid, not of failure. Naomi knew failure intimately. She'd lost scholarships, been denied loans, watched her mother work 60-hour weeks and still have rent late. Failure wasn't new. What scared her now was success. The weight of visibility. The pressure of being the first in a room, or worse, the only one. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "Are you the lady from the news?" Naomi looked up to see a girl, maybe 15, with braids down her back and weary eyes. She stood a few feet away, backpack slung over one shoulder. "I'm not sure," Naomi said. "What news?" "The one about the nanny and the rich guy," the girl said almost defensively. "They were trying to make it sound bad, but my aunt said you handled them like a queen." Naomi gave a soft laugh. "Your aunt sounds smart." The girl hesitated. "You really work for him, the billionaire?" Naomi nodded. "I work with him now, but yes, I was Laya's caregiver." The girl sat down on the far end of the bench. "Cool." They sat in silence for a minute until the girl spoke again. "My mom's trying to go back to school, but she can't find anyone to watch my brother. She said she's too old to be chasing degrees anyway." Naomi turned to her. "She's not." The girl shrugged. "She's tired." Naomi looked down at the folder in her lap. "We're working on something, a place for moms like her, like mine used to be, like I was. It's not ready yet, but it's coming." The girl stared at her. "Really? Really?" The girl stood slowly, a small smile touching her lips. "Well, I'll tell her. And I'll tell my aunt you're real." Naomi smiled. "Tell her I said thank you." That evening, Naomi walked into William's office with the folder in hand. He looked up from his laptop, the soft jazz humming low in the background. "I'm in," she said simply. He closed his computer. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm ready." William stood and crossed the room slowly. "You won't be alone in this." "I know," she replied. "But I want the public side to be yours, not because I can't do it, but because you've got the spotlight already, and I want to make sure the women we serve never become a headline." He nodded. "Then we do this together, quietly, powerfully." Naomi smiled intently. The launch came 3 weeks later, not with cameras or ribbon cuttings, but with quiet meetings in community centers, interviews with local social workers, and late-night brainstorming sessions between Naomi and a small team of hand-picked advisors. They named it the Carter Everett Foundation. Naomi insisted her name come first. William didn't argue. Laya, of course, took it upon herself to draw the first logo, a house with a giant heart in the center, crayons and all. They didn't use it officially, but Naomi had it framed and hung above her desk. At the first private donor meeting, Naomi stood in front of a room of people who'd never had to choose between groceries and rent, explaining what dignity looked like when you lived paycheck to paycheck. "This isn't about charity," she said. "It's about equity. We're not handing out Band-Aids. We're building ladders." William watched from the back of the room, silent, proud, humbled. Afterward, a woman in pearls approached Naomi and said, "You speak like someone who's been through it." "I have," Naomi replied. "But more importantly, I'm still walking beside the ones who are in it right now." Meanwhile, the article had faded from public attention. Another scandal had taken its place, and the gossip circle had moved on. But not everyone forgot. One morning, as Naomi dropped Laya off at the academy, Headmaster Whitmore met her at the door. He cleared his throat and said, "Miss Carter, may I have a word?" Naomi looked him square in the eye. "Is there a problem?" "No," he said quickly. "On the contrary, I just wanted to say the foundation. What you're doing, it's admirable." Naomi tilted her head. "Thank you. Though I hope your admiration extends beyond polite nods at the door." He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Support comes in many forms, Headmaster," she said, "hiring more diverse staff, updating curriculum, listening to the quieter voices in the room. I'll consider that." Naomi offered a smile, the kind that didn't ask for permission. "You do that." Later that night, Naomi sat on the back steps of the Everett home. Laya had fallen asleep early, and the house was quiet. William joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. "You did good today," he said. "I didn't punch a headmaster in the throat," she said. "So, I'll take the win." He chuckled. "You scare them in all the best ways." She sipped her tea, then said softly, "I keep thinking about that girl in the park. How many more are like her, just waiting for someone to say, 'I see you. I'm building something for you.'" William nodded. "That's what this is now." Naomi looked up at the stars. "It's not just a foundation, it's a lighthouse." He glanced at her. "And you? You're the one keeping the flame lit." For the first time that day, Naomi let herself rest. Her shoulders relaxed. Her heart quieted because the world hadn't changed. But she had, and now so would everything else. Naomi didn't recognize the knock. It was too polite for a salesperson, too steady for a neighbor, and too unfamiliar to be William or Laya. She glanced at the clock, just past 11 a.m., and walked toward the front door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she opened it, the last person she expected stood on the other side. "Naomi Carter?" the woman asked. She was older, early 60s maybe, with sharp gray eyes and skin the color of deep mahogany. Her suit was tailored but soft, well-worn, like she'd earned every wrinkle in the fabric. She carried a leather satchel and an air of authority that reminded Naomi of her own mother's pastor. "Yes," Naomi replied cautiously. The woman smiled. My name's Mrs. Bernice Holloway. I'm from the South Seattle Historical Society. May I come in? Naomi hesitated only a second before stepping aside. Of course. She offered her tea, which Mrs. Holloway declined. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, Naomi still slightly guarded. Mrs. Holloway calmed. I'm impatient. I've been following your work, she said. With the foundation. Naomi blinked. It's still so new. New don't mean small, Mrs. Holloway said. Seeds are small too, but look what they grow into. Naomi smiled just slightly. Thank you. I've lived in this city 53 years, the woman continued. I've watched a lot of movements start. Most of them never finish. Too many get swallowed by pride or politics or press. But you, she leaned in, you've been walking quiet and steady. That's the kind that lasts. Naomi looked down at her hands. I'm just trying to build what I wish existed when I was a little girl. That's what all great builders do, Mrs. Holloway said. Then she pulled a folder from her satchel and slid it across the table. We're organizing an exhibit, Voices of the Present, a living archive of Black women in Seattle making change in education, healthcare, advocacy. We want you to be part of it. Naomi stared at the folder. Me? Mrs. Holloway nodded. Yes, ma'am, you. For a long moment, Naomi didn't move. She'd always considered herself the hand behind the curtain, the voice in the back room. But now, somehow, the city had begun to pull her forward. I'd be honored, she said quietly. That evening, William returned home late from a board meeting. Naomi was still awake, reading in the living room, legs curled under her. Laya's drawing pad opened beside her like a second book. He loosened his tie and dropped onto the couch beside her. You look thoughtful, he said. I had a visitor today, she replied. He raised an eyebrow. She told him about Mrs. Holloway, the archive, the invitation. William listened, nodding until she finished. That's amazing, he said. You deserve to be in a museum. She laughed. Careful. That sounds like a backhanded compliment. I mean it, he said, turning serious. You're changing lives. You've changed mine. Naomi paused, unsure how to respond. The words between them had grown more careful lately, more tender, more loaded, and though they danced around it, neither had stepped into that unspoken space yet. But something was shifting. Are you scared? He asked suddenly. She looked at him. Of what? Of what this is becoming. Us. All of it. Naomi took a breath. I'm scared of doing it wrong. Of wanting too much. He nodded slowly. Me too. She closed the book in her lap and placed it on the table. But I'm not scared of trying. Their eyes met, and for a moment, silence filled the room with a warmth that didn't need words. 2 days later, Naomi visited her mother's grave. It had been over a year, not out of avoidance, but out of exhaustion. The grieving had happened slowly, on the bus rides between night shifts, in the grocery aisles when she passed her mother's favorite cereal, in the sound of Laya laughing the same way she used to. She stood by the small, weather-worn headstone and whispered, I hope you're seeing this. She laid a flower at the base and sat in the grass beside it. Sometimes I still hear your voice, especially when I'm tired. You'd say, tired don't mean done, baby. She smiled through tears. I think I'm building something you'd be proud of, maybe even something you started, and I just didn't realize. The wind rustled gently through the nearby trees. Naomi sat with the silence a while longer before rising. On the walk back to the car, she felt lighter. Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to Naomi, not from the academy or a news outlet, but from a woman named Clarissa June. Handwritten in blue ink, it read, Dear Miss Carter, I'm writing to thank you. I'm a single mother of 2, and after seeing your foundation on the local news, I applied for one of the childcare scholarships. I've since re-enrolled in nursing school. You don't know me, but you saved a piece of my future I thought was already lost. Thank you for walking ahead of us, so we know where to go. Naomi folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box she kept in her closet. It joined two others, notes of gratitude, of recognition, of connection. Small things maybe, but proof. Proof that impact didn't need volume, just intention. On Friday evening, Naomi and William sat on the back patio, watching Laya chase fireflies. "She told me she wants to be a teacher," William said. Naomi smiled. "Last week it was a ballerina. Before that, a pilot. Today it was a teacher," he said again, more seriously. She said, "Like Mimi, but with a chalkboard." Naomi's heart warmed. "Well, I can't argue with that." "She also asked me if Mimi was going to stay forever," he added softly. Naomi turned her head slowly. "And what did you say?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "I told her Mimi gets to decide." Naomi said nothing for a long moment. Then, without looking away, she reached over and took his hand. And in the gentle twilight of their backyard, with a child's laughter floating through the air and roots beginning to take hold beneath the surface of their lives, something unspoken finally found its voice, not rushed, not declared, but understood. By the second week of April, the foundation had begun to attract attention from circles neither Naomi nor William had expected. It wasn't just local schools or city councils reaching out. It was regional networks, women's organizations in Chicago and Atlanta. Even a quiet inquiry from a university in D.C. asking if Naomi would consider speaking on modern caregiving models and equity. It should have been validating, but with the spotlight came new shadows. Naomi first noticed it during an early morning coffee run. As she waited for her order, a woman in line behind her leaned forward and said, just above a whisper, "Heard you got more than a paycheck out of that job." Naomi turned slowly. The woman looked familiar, maybe a mother from the academy or someone from the gala, dressed in her Lululemon best, sunglasses perched atop her carefully styled hair. "I'm sorry?" Naomi asked calmly. The woman smiled. "Nothing. Just, you've made quite the climb. Impressive, really." Naomi said nothing. She didn't blink, didn't break her gaze. The silence between them stretched taut. The barista called her name.
Naomi took her cup, nodded once, and walked out without a word, but it stayed with her. That afternoon, William found her in the foundation office, seated at her desk, but not working. Her hands were clasped in her lap, her eyes distant. "You're quiet," he said, setting a coffee beside her. "Someone made a comment this morning," she replied. He could already guess. "About us." She nodded. "They think I used you." William sat across from her. "That's lazy thinking. Cruel, but predictable, isn't it?" Naomi's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. "I've spent my whole life making sure no one ever thought I was taking advantage of anything. Every grade I earned, every job I held, I had to be twice as good and half as visible. And still, I'm a scandal in someone's brunch conversation." "You're more than what they say," William said. "I know," she whispered, "but some days it still scrapes against the bone." William leaned forward. "Naomi, tell me what you need right now. What would help?"
She looked at him. "I need to know this won't break us, that what we're building won't sink under the weight of their small minds." He didn't hesitate. "Then I'll keep building until the foundation outgrows their gossip." Despite the rumors, the foundation's work deepened. Naomi launched a new initiative, a mentorship program connecting young mothers with professional women in medicine, law, and education. The pilot session took place on a Saturday morning inside a repurposed library space the foundation had just renovated. 20 women showed up. Some carried toddlers on their hips, others wore hospital scrubs, having come straight from overnight shifts. They were tired. They were hopeful. They were real. Naomi opened the session with a simple sentence. "We rise by standing on each other's shoulders, not climbing over them." The room erupted into knowing nods, laughter, and a few tears. After the session, as Naomi packed away materials, One young woman lingered behind. She was tall, maybe 22, with anxious eyes and a tight grip on her tote bag. "I just wanted to say thank you," the girl said. "Everyone always talks about changing things, but this felt different." Naomi smiled. "Because it is. Can I ask you something?" the girl continued. "Is it true you used to just be a nanny?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I was never just a nanny. I was Laya's caregiver, her teacher, her protector, her calm in the storm. And now I use that same love and grit for women like you." The girl nodded, a bit embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that." "I know," Naomi said gently. "That's why I answered the way I did." Meanwhile, Laya's school had begun rehearsals for their spring showcase, a mix of music, skits, and storytelling. When Laya brought home a permission slip, asking if she had an adult family member who could attend and participate in Story Day, she marched right into the living room, handed it to Naomi, and said, "You're coming, and you're telling them about the day we made snow angels in the kitchen?" Naomi laughed. "That was a mess. But fun," Laya beamed. "And stories are supposed to be fun." William looked up from his laptop. "I'll bring the mop this time." Naomi signed the slip. "I'll be there." Story Day arrived with warm sunshine and the smell of construction paper glue. Parents packed into the small auditorium. Naomi wore a navy dress and a pair of flats Laya had picked out herself. "You look like a teacher, princess," Laya declared proudly. When it was Naomi's turn to speak, she stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand, heart thumping beneath her ribs. "I want to tell you a story," she began. "Not just about a little girl in a kitchen full of flour, but about what happens when love looks like pancakes, patience, and sink baths." Laughter rose from the crowd. Even Headmaster Whitmore chuckled. Naomi continued, "Sometimes family isn't made by blood. It's made by choice, by time, by the moments no one else sees. When a child cries at 2 a.m. or laughs so hard they hiccup for an hour, that's what I have with Laya. That's what she gave me. And I hope in some way I've given that back to her." Applause erupted. Laya, seated in the front row, stood up and clapped the loudest. When Naomi returned to her seat, William leaned in and whispered, "You just baptized a room full of skeptics." She smiled. "Let them say what they want. I know who I am." Later that night, Naomi found a new note tucked into her jacket pocket. Crayon writing, block letters. "Mimi, you are my home. I love you, Laya." Naomi pressed the paper to her heart and closed her eyes. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. She had love. She had purpose. And she had a story no headline could ever write. Naomi stood in the kitchen rinsing blueberries for Laya's breakfast when her phone buzzed across the counter. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in years. Monica Carter, her cousin, the one who'd moved to Georgia, who hadn't called since Naomi's mother's funeral, who had once told her with biting precision, "Don't let white people turn you into a background character in your own life." She dried her hands and hesitated before answering. "Monica," Naomi said. A beat of silence, then, "Girl, you really made it." Naomi blinked. "It's been a long time." "I know," Monica said, her voice softer, "but you've been all over my feed. Someone reposted your Story Day speech. I watched it twice. Then I cried. Then I cursed you for not picking up the phone for 2 damn years. Naomi laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "I didn't know if we were still good." "We weren't," Monica said bluntly. "But maybe now we could be." Naomi leaned against the counter. "I'd like that." "Good, because I have something to tell you." She paused. "You remember my sister Tasha? Her daughter's pregnant, 17, dropped out. She's staying with me now, and I don't know how to help her." Naomi sat down slowly at the table. "You're already helping. I want to actually help, not just feed her. I want her to have a shot. I want her to hear from someone who got out of the cycle, who didn't just survive, but thrived." Naomi's throat tightened. "I'll fly out." "Wait, what?" "I'll come to Atlanta. We can talk. You can show her what love looks like when it shows up." The silence on the other end swelled, then cracked with tears. "Thank you," Monica whispered. 3 days later, Naomi stood on a narrow porch in a neighborhood that smelled like fried okra and the rusted memory of summer storms. Monica met her at the door with arms wide and eyes wet. Inside, the house was small, but bursting with sound. Music, laughter, the hum of old ceiling fans. Tasha's daughter, Bree, sat cross-legged on the couch. She looked like Naomi had at that age, sharp eyes, soft defense, a belly full of both fear and life. They spoke for hours. Naomi told her about the nights she slept sitting up with Laya in her arms, about the days she walked 3 miles to work because the bus was late, about the guilt, the grace, the grit. "You don't have to become someone else," Naomi said. "You just have to become more of you, the part of you that fights to show up anyway." Bree wiped her face and whispered, "Nobody's ever talked to me like that." Naomi squeezed her hand. "Well, get used to it." She left Atlanta with a new fire inside her. This couldn't just be a foundation. It had to be a movement. When she returned to Seattle, she met William on the porch just as the sun began to dip behind the trees. He had Laya on his shoulders, giggling as she pointed at clouds and assigned them shapes. "Welcome home," he said. Naomi looked up at them, one hand shielding her eyes from the golden light. "I have an idea," she said. William grinned. "That sounds like trouble." "It is," she said. "Beautiful trouble." They sat later that evening, papers spread across the dining table. Naomi spoke quickly, passionately laying out a new branch of the foundation. The Bridge Project, a mobile program connecting at-risk young mothers across the country with local resources, mentors, and emergency support. "No buildings," she said. "Just people, just movement." William nodded slowly. "You'll need funding." "I'll get it," Naomi said. "But I want you to match whatever I raise. Quietly, no big announcements, just matching power behind closed doors." William leaned back. "Deal." Then his face softened. "And Naomi, I want you to know this. All of this, it's not just impressive, it's sacred. You're building something holy." Naomi looked away for a second, eyes glistening. "Funny, that's what Monica said too." That week, Naomi held the first planning meeting for the Bridge Project. She invited women from all corners of Seattle, nurses, social workers, mothers, teachers. Some came in blazers, others in hoodies. All came with questions, ideas, open hands. Naomi stood at the head of the table and said, "We don't need permission to change the world. We just need each other." By the end of the night, 12 women had signed on as regional liaisons. 2 pledged to take the model back to Detroit and Tulsa. 1 asked if she could name a scholarship after her grandmother. The movement had begun. Meanwhile, not everyone was celebrating. In the background, unseen for now, a familiar name was preparing a private lawsuit. A board member at the academy, one who disapproved of Naomi from the beginning, had found a legal angle: conflict of interest, undue influence, inappropriate boundaries. It was baseless, but it had the power to shake things. One night, William received a discreet message from his lawyer. "They're coming for her. You need to be ready." He didn't tell Naomi right away, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want to distract her fire. But something in her noticed. "You're quieter," she said one evening as they folded laundry together. William hesitated, then told her everything. Naomi sat still for a long moment. Then she exhaled and said, "Let them come." William frowned. "Naomi." "No," she said. "Let them. I've spent my whole life preparing for battles like this. What they don't understand is they can't shame me with things I'm already proud of." He looked at her with awe. "You're not afraid?" "Oh, I'm terrified," she admitted. "But fear's never been the boss of me." She turned to him, folded shirt in hand. "If they try to drag me through the mud, I'll plant roots there." It began with whispers again. But this time, they didn't stay whispers for long. Naomi was sitting in a downtown cafe reviewing grant proposals when Luther called. They filed it, he said flatly. She didn't ask who. She didn't have to. The same board member who had scowled at her during every academy function, who had once referred to her as the help with opinions, had finally acted. "What's the angle?" she asked. "Conflict of interest. Claiming you leveraged your position in William's household to secure donor relationships, gain public clout, and influence the school's operations." Naomi let out a soft, humorless laugh. "So, I'm being sued for being visible. They're trying to tarnish your legitimacy, and by extension, William's judgment." Naomi stirred her coffee, watching the swirl. "What's the real goal?" "To push you out," Luther said. "Of his life? Of the foundation? Of their clean little story?" Naomi closed the folder in front of her. "Let them try." William was livid, not angry, seething. He paced his home office, every muscle taut with restraint. "This is garbage," he spat. "I've donated millions to that board, hosted their children, supported their initiatives, and now they want to weaponize Naomi's grace against her." Luther stood calmly near the window. "It's not about truth, William. It's about perception. They're trying to shame you into retreat." William stopped pacing. "Then they've miscalculated." He picked up his phone and began typing furiously. Luther raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" William didn't look up. "Calling in every favor I've never asked for." The next day, Naomi arrived at the foundation to find reporters outside. They weren't aggressive yet, but the presence of 2 cameras and a man with a boom mic meant it was only a matter of time before her name was everywhere. She walked past them with calm, eyes forward, shoulders squared. Inside, her staff waited. One of the interns, a girl named Angie, stood at the front desk with wide eyes. "Miss Carter, should we cancel today's sessions?" "No," Naomi said firmly. "We keep going. If anyone asks why, tell them this: our work doesn't stop for gossip." She spent the next few hours reviewing budgets, checking on families, making calls. She didn't hide, she didn't flinch, but inside, something heavy settled just beneath her ribs. By 4 p.m., Meredith arrived. She strode into the office like she owned the building. Red lipstick perfect, heels unapologetic. "Where is she?" she asked the receptionist. Naomi stepped out of her office. "Meredith?" Meredith walked straight up to her and pulled her into a tight hug. "I heard, and I'm here. You are not walking through this alone." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you." "Now," Meredith said, pulling out a thick binder, "we're going to war, legally, socially, and publicly. I've spoken to 3 PR strategists, a civil rights attorney, and, wait for it, a former federal judge who says he's willing to file an amicus brief in your defense if this goes to court." Naomi stared. "You did all that today?" "I'm retired, darling," Meredith said. "I've got nothing but time and old rage to repurpose." Naomi laughed, really laughed for the first time that week. That night, after Laya had gone to bed, Naomi sat with William on the porch. The sky was ink blue, and the hum of crickets filled the quiet. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for bringing you into this world where people weaponize skin, love, and intention." Naomi looked at him. "You didn't bring me into it. I've been living in it my whole life." He nodded. "But now they're using me to hurt you. That's what I can't stomach." Naomi reached over and took his hand. "Let me ask you something. Anything. If this gets worse, if the press twists everything, if donors pull back, if the Academy votes to distance themselves from us, will you still be standing next to me?" He didn't even blink. "There's nowhere else I'd be." She exhaled. "Then we win, no matter what." 2 days later, Naomi made her move. She called a press conference. Meredith helped organize it, insisting they hold it at the community center, not a luxury venue, not a hotel ballroom. Let it happen in the space where the work actually lived. When Naomi stepped up to the podium, the cameras clicked like a thunderstorm. She stood tall, wearing no jewelry but her mother's old pendant, her voice clear and unwavering. There has been speculation about my role, my worth, and my right to exist fully in this story, she began. So, let me clear that up. I was a caregiver, a teacher, a woman who loved a child deeply during the hardest season of her life. That love was not transactional. It was transformational, for her, for me, and apparently for those who feel threatened by what that says about their world. She paused. I am not ashamed of where I came from. I'm proud of every floor I've mopped, every bottle I've warmed, every degree I earned while others slept. What I've built, what we've built, is not a scandal. It is a model for care, for equity, for how this world should work. Then, she turned slightly toward the audience, and if telling the truth cost me favor with institutions rooted in fear, so be it, because I'd rather lose their approval than lose myself. The room went silent. Then someone clapped, then another, and then the whole place rose to its feet. William watched from the sidelines, chest tight with emotion. He had never loved her more. That night, Naomi tucked Laya into bed. Mimi, Laya whispered sleepily, are you sad people are being mean? Naomi smoothed her curls. Sometimes, but then I remember something. What? I'm not here to be liked, baby. I'm here to be light. Laya smiled and drifted to sleep. And Naomi sat beside her, knowing the storm hadn't passed, but she had found her shelter, and it was stronger than ever. 3 days after the conference, Naomi received a letter, not an email, not a text, but an actual letter, handwritten in neat cursive on thick cream paper. The envelope was unmarked except for a Seattle return address. She opened it at her desk while the foundation office buzzed quietly around her. Miss Carter, I watched your speech. I wept. My mother was a domestic worker. My grandmother was a laundress. I spent my entire life pretending their hands didn't build my foundation just so I could be taken seriously in boardrooms. You reminded me what I should have remembered all along. Their dignity was not small. It was sacred. I am on the board of the Seattle Women's Civic Alliance. We've made many mistakes in whom we've chosen to uplift. I hope it's not too late to correct that. Would you consider being our keynote speaker for this year's annual Equity Summit? You would honor us with your truth. With regret and respect, Dr. Elise Chapman. Naomi read it twice, then again. She thought about her mother, about the rough skin on her knuckles from years of house cleaning, about how she used to whisper, "Don't let anyone make you feel small, baby. Not even when you are grown." She folded the letter and placed it carefully in her drawer. Then she picked up her phone and dialed, "Dr. Chapman, this is Naomi Carter. Let's talk." That night, Naomi and William stood in the kitchen making dinner. Laya at the kitchen island drawing pictures of Mimi talking to a big crowd, complete with stick figure microphones and sparkles in Naomi's hair. "She gave me stars," Naomi said, pointing at the drawing and smiling. "You deserve them," William replied, flipping vegetables in a pan. "Laya's only saying what the rest of us haven't drawn yet." Naomi leaned against the counter. "I got invited to speak at the Equity Summit. It's a big deal. Normally, they only pick former politicians or CEOs. William looked up. "Let me guess. After the press conference?" "Of course." He paused. "Are you going to accept?" Naomi nodded. "I think I have to. Not because I need a stage, but because the people watching need to see someone like me on that stage." He came around to her and rested his hands gently on her arms. "You do realize what you've become, don't you?" She tilted her head. "What?" "A living answer," he said, "to every girl who ever asked if she was enough." Naomi looked at him, eyes shining. "That's a heavy thing to carry." He smiled. "Not for someone with shoulders like yours." Meanwhile, the legal pressure quietly collapsed. With Meredith's strategic outreach, the public support, and a sudden shift in board sentiment, no doubt triggered by the viral speech, and a flurry of emails from donors, the lawsuit was quietly dropped. No formal apology was issued, but the silence was loud with retreat. Luther called Naomi to tell her, "It's over." He said, "They walked it back entirely. You're clear." Naomi closed her eyes for a long moment. "Thank you, Luther, for standing with me." He chuckled. "You're the kind of client that makes a man wish he'd gone into public defense instead of corporate law. Keep shaking the ground, Naomi." She hung up and turned to find Laya standing in the doorway with a plastic tiara on her head. "Guess what?" Laya said. "What, baby?" "I told my class that Mimi is not just a queen, she's a warrior queen." Naomi laughed and pulled her in. "Then that must make you a warrior princess." Laya nodded proudly. "Exactly." In the days that followed, Naomi began preparing her Equity Summit speech. But unlike the press conference, this time it wasn't about defense. It was about direction. She spent evenings reading old journal entries, reviewing stories from women in the Foundation's network, listening to interviews with matriarchs who had long gone unrecognized. She wasn't just preparing to speak. She was preparing to honor. One afternoon, she drove to a senior living community on the edge of the city. One of the Foundation's early volunteers had mentioned her great-aunt, Miss Ida, who had once been one of the first black women to serve as a nurse in Seattle's public hospital. Naomi sat with Miss Ida on a sunny porch, sipping sweet tea. "People forget," Miss Ida said, her voice thin but strong. "They think change comes from speeches and votes, but it came from our knees scrubbing floors, praying in corners, raising other people's babies while we held ours in our hearts." Naomi reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's the truth I want to carry to the stage." Miss Ida smiled. "Then don't carry it alone. Call out their names. Say them like they're still here." Naomi nodded. "I will." When the day of the summit arrived, Naomi stood behind the curtain backstage, holding a small slip of paper in her hand. On it were 5 names: her mother, Miss Ida, Bree, Monica, and Laya. Women who shaped her, women who reminded her why this mattered. The moderator stepped to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Naomi Carter." Applause filled the auditorium as Naomi stepped into the light. She walked to the podium with grace and a quiet power that filled every corner of the room. She began softly. "My name is Naomi Carter. I was once told I belonged in the background, that my job was to serve quietly, to love privately, to give everything and expect nothing." She paused. "But I am here today not as an exception, but as a continuation of women who scrubbed and stitched and sang their way through injustice. Of mothers who gave from empty hands, of daughters who refused to disappear." She glanced down at the slip of paper, then back at the audience. "I speak their names not for applause, but so you remember who this country was really built on. It wasn't steel or policy. It was women like my mother, women like yours." As she spoke, the room fell into reverent silence. And now we build differently, with equity, with intention, with voices like ours not whispering, but leading. When she stepped away from the podium, the entire room stood. Some clapped, some cried. William stood too, hand over his heart. And in the front row, Laya, sitting on Meredith's lap, held up a homemade sign made from glitter and cardboard. It said in wobbly letters, "Mimi is the light." Naomi saw it and smiled through tears, because in that moment she knew this wasn't just a victory, it was a legacy. The morning after the Equity Summit, Naomi woke to find a stack of letters on the front porch. Not emails, not messages. Letters, handwritten notes wrapped in string, some slipped into brown envelopes, others simply folded and tucked under a stone to keep from blowing away. She sat on the steps in her robe, steam rising from the coffee mug in her hands as the world around her moved softly. The neighborhood was quiet. The sky wore the pale blue of early spring. One by one, she opened the letters. "You reminded me of my grandmother. I hadn't thought of her in years. Thank you for that. I always thought people like me didn't have a place in rooms like that. Watching you up there made me think maybe I do. I was in the audience with my daughter. She's 12. She whispered to me halfway through, "That's who I want to be." Naomi read each one slowly, some with trembling hands. She hadn't known, couldn't have known that telling her truth would unlock something so wide, so unexpected. William stepped out onto the porch behind her, tie half-tied, coffee in hand. "You've got fan mail," Naomi smiled without looking up. "It's not for me, it's for the story." He sat beside her. "Same thing, Naomi. You are the story." "No." She turned to him, quiet for a moment. "What happens when the applause fades?" He met her eyes. "Then we keep building. Not for the noise, but for the foundation." Naomi nodded. "Then we've got more work to do." Later that afternoon, Naomi visited the foundation. The staff had decorated the entrance with photos from the summit. Laya's glitter sign, "Mimi as the light," had been framed and hung near the reception desk. Angie approached, carrying a thick folder. "We've had 47 requests to bring the bridge project to new cities." 47! Naomi blinked. "Since when?" "Since your speech aired on public radio this morning." "Radio? Meredith sent a copy to NPR?" Angie said with a smirk. "Didn't tell you because Naomi needs to focus on leading, not strategizing." Naomi shook her head, half laughing, half overwhelmed. "Anything else?" Angie hesitated. "Yes, there's a visitor in the conference room." Naomi frowned. "Do they have an appointment?" "No," Angie said, "but she said she's your sister." Naomi's breath caught. She hadn't heard that word, sister, spoken with such weight in years. She walked down the hall, heels clicking softly against the floor. Inside the conference room stood a woman in her late 30s. Same eyes, same jawline. Her hair was shorter, curls tucked behind her ears. She wore a jean jacket over a faded t-shirt. "Simone!" Naomi froze in the doorway. "I didn't know you were in Seattle." Simone looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't until this morning." Naomi stepped inside and shut the door. "I saw your speech," Simone said. "Actually, Monica sent it to me, said I should watch it and get over myself. So, I did. And here I am." Naomi folded her arms. "Why now?" Simone looked down. "Because you were right about everything. About Mom, about the legacy we ignored. I was angry for a long time. Angry that you stayed with those white families, that you let yourself be used." Naomi's jaw tightened. "I wasn't used. I chose to love. There's a difference." Simone nodded quickly. "I know that now. I just didn't want to understand it back then. I thought power only looked one way, and then I saw you standing on that stage, owning the room, honoring our roots, and I realized I've been carrying shame that was never mine to carry." Naomi sat down slowly, eyes softening. "You hurt me," she said. "I know," Simone whispered. "And I'm sorry. I want to start again if you'll let me." Naomi looked at her for a long time. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was clearing like a field after a storm. She finally nodded. "We start with lunch." Simone smiled, eyes glassy. "I'd like that." That weekend, William surprised Naomi with a visit to a property just outside the city. "It's not an estate," he said, "but it's got potential. Big land, old barn, good bones." Naomi looked at the space. Fields dotted with early wildflowers, trees tall and swaying gently. "What is this place?" "It's your future headquarters," he said, "if you want it." Naomi blinked. "You bought this?" "I secured it. The purchase is waiting on your name. We could turn this into a community retreat, motherhood workshops, mental health spaces, educational retreats for teen girls. You name it." Naomi turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. She imagined bonfires and barefoot children, circles of women laughing beneath trees, rooms with rocking chairs and music from old radios, a place where care wasn't whispered, but celebrated. She turned back to him. Let's build it. That night, Naomi sat on her porch, notebook in hand, scribbling ideas under the moonlight. Laya crawled into her lap, half asleep, blanket dragging behind her. Mimi? Yes, baby. When I grow up, can I be just like you? Naomi kissed the top of her head. No, baby, you'll be better. Laya yawned. But I want to help people too. Naomi smiled. Then remember this. You don't need a microphone to be powerful. Just a kind heart and a loud truth. As Laya drifted off in her arms, Naomi looked out into the night. The applause might fade, the lights might dim, but the work would go on. The healing would spread, and the rooms once closed to women like her. She'd tear down the locks, throw open the doors, and invite everyone in. The old barn creaked beneath Naomi's boots as she walked through it with Luther, clipboard in hand, the morning fog still clinging to the field outside like a soft curtain. You sure this thing won't collapse when someone sneezes? Luther asked, knocking his knuckles against a weathered beam. Naomi smirked. It's stronger than it looks. Kind of like us. They were inspecting the property, the Bridge Meadow, the name she'd finally chosen for the future retreat. Plans were already being drawn for overnight cabins, communal gardens, a teaching kitchen, and a wraparound porch where women could sit and rest, not just recover. Naomi had insisted it feel like home, not a facility, not a program. Just peace with a purpose. You'll need permits, Luther said, flipping through forms, and a long-term maintenance plan. You sure you're ready to build a whole world from scratch? Naomi looked around. Light streamed through the broken slats above. Dust floated like holy ash. I've been building my whole life, she said. Now I just get to do it out loud. He smiled. Then let's raise the roof. Back in the city, the foundation buzzed with movement. Angie had stepped into a new role, director of community expansion, and already had satellite teams forming in Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix. Meredith had taken a personal interest in mentorship workshops for women over 60, saying with a grin, "Some of us have more to give than just retirement plans." Naomi moved between meetings with quiet intensity. She was no longer simply leading, she was planting, and the seeds were taking root. One afternoon, she stopped by a new mother support circle hosted in a local church basement. The room smelled like vanilla candles and Lysol. Folding chairs formed a loose circle around a worn rug. Babies cooed and fussed while women shared stories, some in tears, some in laughter, all in truth. When Naomi entered, they paused. Then someone clapped, and then another. Not out of spectacle, but respect. Like recognizing a sister who'd just come home. She sat down. No fanfare. Just one more woman in the circle. A teen mom with deep brown eyes spoke next. I was told I'd never be more than a statistic. Then I heard Miss Carter speak on the radio, and I thought, maybe being underestimated is just another kind of freedom. Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat. That night she wrote a note to herself and pinned it to her bathroom mirror. Don't forget what it felt like to be the girl on the floor with nothing but grit and hope. Build from there, always. Then came the call. It was early morning. Naomi was making pancakes, Laya's favorite, with blueberries shaped into stars, when her phone rang. It was her Aunt Clara from Baton Rouge. Baby, she said, her voice thick with grief. It's your daddy. He's gone. Naomi went still. Her father, long estranged, half a ghost in her life, had been in and out of her memories like a skipped record. He'd left when she was 12, hadn't shown up to her high school graduation, didn't call when her mother died, but he was still her father, and something inside her broke anyway. She flew down 2 days later. Simone met her at the airport, this time with no bitterness in her eyes, just shared grief. Funeral's on Thursday, she said. He didn't have much, but he left a note. Naomi raised an eyebrow. For me? Simone nodded and handed her a wrinkled envelope. Inside was a single page, his handwriting shaky, but familiar. Naomi, I was wrong to leave. I watched your life from afar. I saw your name in papers, your face on screens. And I cried knowing I hadn't earned a place beside it, but I need you to know I was proud, even when I was silent, especially then. Forgive me if you can, but whether you do or don't, know this. Your mother raised a force of nature, and you made me believe in redemption even if I never reached it. With love, Daddy. Naomi stared at the paper until the words blurred. She didn't cry at the funeral, but she did speak. My father taught me 2 things, she said at the pulpit. 1, that absence leaves marks deeper than presence, and 2, that even broken stories have chapters worth reading. She placed the note in his casket, not for him, really, but for herself. A full stop to a sentence that had lingered too long. When she returned to Seattle, William was waiting at the gate. He didn't ask questions. He just opened his arms, and Naomi collapsed into them. For a long moment, she just breathed, felt, let the weight exhale out of her. I didn't know it would still hurt, she murmured. You loved, he said. Even when you weren't loved back the way you deserved. That's not weakness, Naomi. That's power most people never touch. She looked up at him. Thank you for being soft when I forget how. He kissed her forehead. That's what love is, a soft place to land. The next morning, Naomi took Laya to the bridge meadow. They walked the land together, hand in hand, as workers marked off future garden plots and poured the first concrete for the community hall. Laya skipped ahead and pointed to the barn. Can that be my clubhouse? Naomi laughed. One day, maybe. But not yet? Laya asked. Naomi knelt beside her. Not yet, because first we have to build it strong so it lasts a long time. Laya nodded thoughtfully. Like love? Naomi blinked, caught off guard. Yes, exactly like love. They stood in the field for a while, the wind playing in their hair. And Naomi thought of all the rooms she'd entered where she wasn't supposed to be, all the doors she'd pushed open, all the times she'd been underestimated. And she smiled because now she wasn't just walking through rooms, she was building them. The invitation arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope, one of those glossy, formal pieces of mail that usually came from gala committees or political fundraisers. Naomi was sorting through grant requests at her office when she opened it. Inside was a simple card. You are hereby invited to serve as a panelist at the National Policy Summit on Family Equity, hosted at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Your voice, your work, and your journey have inspired national conversation. We believe you belong at the table where change begins. She sat back in her chair, the weight of it hitting her like a soft wave. Washington, National Summit, policy discussions. It wasn't just a seat at the table, it was recognition, not for appearances, but for substance. She stared at the invitation for a long moment before whispering to herself, Mama, can you believe this? At dinner that night, she told William and Laya. Laya's eyes grew wide. The Capitol? Like where the president lives? William grinned. Almost. It's where the people who make the rules meet. Laya looked at Naomi, mouth open in awe. You're going to help make the rules? Naomi chuckled. Maybe help rewrite a few. William raised a glass of sweet tea. To rewriting what they never wrote for us. They clinked glasses, and Naomi felt something settle inside her. Pride, yes, but something deeper. Purpose, the kind that didn't shine in lights, but stayed steady in the dark. Preparing for the summit felt different than the keynote. This wasn't a speech. This was dialogue, policy, negotiation, real impact. Naomi spent late nights poring through federal child care reports, racial equity data, early education policy history. She met with advisors from the foundation and mentors she'd leaned on in the past. Meredith dropped by with a notepad full of pointed questions. She said, some congressman might use to test your composure. Naomi raised an eyebrow. You mean rattle me? Meredith smirked. Exactly, which is why I came to prepare you. They spent 2 hours in Naomi's living room running drills. What do you say to critics who argue that community-based solutions are too idealistic to scale? Meredith asked. Naomi didn't miss a beat. I say maybe they should spend a day in a mother's shoes before deciding what's realistic. And what if they question your qualifications? Naomi leaned forward. Then I tell them that lived experience is the most underutilized credential in this country and that I have it in abundance. Meredith snapped her fingers. There she is. Don't shrink, Naomi. Take up space. Naomi nodded, more determined than ever. The night before the flight to D.C., Naomi tucked Laya in gently. The little girl clutched her worn, stuffed bear and looked up at her. Are you nervous? A little, Naomi admitted. It's a big room with a lot of important people. But you're important too, Laya whispered, sleepy but sure. You're the Mimi who makes everything better. Naomi kissed her forehead. Thank you, baby. That's all the courage I need. Washington, D.C. was crisp and cold when Naomi arrived. The Capitol dome shimmered against the gray morning sky like something out of a dream. The summit was held in a grand hall, polished wood, marble columns, the scent of fresh paper and ambition in the air. Naomi stood backstage for a moment, grounding herself. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to impact. The panel included former senators, nonprofit executives, and a university chancellor. Naomi, with her calm posture and unapologetic presence, stood out, not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't try to. When her turn came, she spoke with clarity and depth. Policy without humanity is paperwork, she said. And if we continue to craft legislation without listening to the very people it's meant to serve, we'll keep missing the mark. I've raised children I didn't birth. I've comforted mothers who couldn't afford comfort. I've built programs out of empty bank accounts and full hearts. I'm not here to theorize equity. I'm here to live it and make sure others can too. The room was silent. Then a slow, steady round of applause rose, more meaningful than any standing ovation. After the panel, a senator approached her quietly. You said what most of us are too cautious to say out loud, he said. Would you consider consulting on our upcoming early childhood policy reform? Naomi didn't flinch. Only if we center it around the voices you're not used to hearing, he nodded. That's why I'm asking you. Back in Seattle, news of her appearance spread. A clip from the summit was shared thousands of times, often with captions like, "This is who we've been waiting for," or "From caretaker to changemaker." Naomi barely had time to breathe before her inbox was filled with invitations to collaborate, to advise, to co-lead national initiatives. But she remained grounded. She returned to the Bridge Meadow the next day, walking through the half-finished hall where drywall dust floated in the air. She watched a group of volunteers hammer beams in place while a teenage girl painted a mural on the far wall. The girl looked up and grinned. Miss Carter, look, I'm painting my mom and me. Naomi walked over. The mural showed 2 black women standing in front of a sunrise, hands clasped. It's beautiful, Naomi said softly. The girl paused. I want to be like you when I grow up, but maybe even louder. Naomi laughed. Good, be loud, be big. Don't wait for permission. And in that dusty, imperfect space, she felt it again. Not fame, not recognition, but alignment. The world was beginning to shift, not because of a speech, not because of one summit, but because Naomi Carter had chosen to walk into rooms not built for her and sit down anyway. And now, she was helping redesign the rooms. The first time Naomi stood on the porch of the completed Bridge Meadow, it was quiet. Not the kind of silence that presses down, but the soft, reverent hush of something finally whole. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, painting the sky in golds and rose, casting long shadows across the land. In the distance, wind chimes danced gently from a new cabin's eaves. She could hear laughter from inside the main hall. Women sharing stories over a potluck meal, children giggling in a reading corner, music playing low from an old record player someone had donated. Naomi stood still for a moment, breathing in the scent of wood, grass, and cinnamon. William stepped up beside her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. They said this kind of place couldn't be done without $1 million endowment and a dozen sponsors. Naomi took the mug. And we proved them wrong. Again. He smiled. You didn't just build a building, Naomi. You built belonging. They clinked mugs. To what they said couldn't exist, to what now does, she replied. Inside the main hall, a celebration was underway, not just of the grand opening, but of the community that had grown around the project. The place was alive with color, quilts on the walls, flowers on every table, photos of mothers and daughters, mentors and mentees. Naomi had insisted that every inch of the space reflect the hands that built it, not donors, but doers. Angie gave a short speech about the expansion of Bridge Meadow programs to 4 new cities. Meredith followed with an emotional thank you to the volunteers. Then Luther raised his glass. To Naomi, he said, for making space where others saw limits, for remembering the names history forgot, and for teaching us that justice isn't just a courtroom word, it's a kitchen table one. Applause filled the room. Naomi, standing near the back, took a quiet sip of her coffee. She wasn't the kind of woman who craved the spotlight. But in that moment, surrounded by the people whose lives had intertwined with hers, strangers turned sisters, girls turned leaders, she felt seen in the most sacred way, not celebrated for surviving, but honored for building. The next day, Naomi sat on a bench at the edge of the property with Simone. They watched Laya and Simone's teenage son, Darren, play with a soccer ball in the field. It's wild, Simone said. How far we came from Baton Rouge. Naomi smiled. How far we came from that little apartment with the leaky sink and Mama's gospel records. Simone looked at her. I'm sorry for not showing up sooner, for not standing beside you when you needed me most. Naomi put a hand on her sister's. You're here now, and you're doing the work. That matters more. They sat in silence for a while, watching the kids. A hawk circled overhead, high and steady. Simone said softly, Do you think Mama would be proud? Naomi didn't hesitate. I think she's in every brick of this place. I think she knew I'd build it even when I didn't. That evening, Naomi tucked Laya into bed in their small on-site cottage. The girl was sleepy from a day of play, her cheeks flushed and hair tangled with wind and joy. Mimi? Laya asked, eyes half closed. Yes, baby. Is this our forever home? Naomi smiled, brushing a curl from Laya's forehead. It's our heart home. That means even if we go somewhere else, we always carry this place inside us. Laya nodded, satisfied. Then I'm going to build a heart home one day, too, for kids who need it. Naomi's voice caught. You already are, sweetheart. Every time you love, every time you listen, you're building. She kissed her goodnight and stepped outside. The stars were just beginning to prick the sky, bold and bright. She walked to the porch swing and sat beside William, who handed her a glass of red wine without a word. They swayed gently together, listening to the chirping of crickets and the creak of wood beneath them. After a long pause, William said, Do you realize you've become a kind of North Star for people? Naomi chuckled softly. That sounds heavy. It's not. It's luminous. You don't have to guide them with force. Just presence. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. I didn't mean to become any of this. I know, he said, but you did, and you did it without losing your softness. They sat in silence, watching the dark sky deepen. Finally, Naomi whispered, I used to think legacy was about achievement. Now I know it's about love. the kind that ripples generation after generation. William kissed her temple. Then yours is eternal. A few weeks later, Naomi stood again before a crowd, this time at a small-town high school in rural Georgia, where she'd been invited to speak. The gym was filled with girls in mismatched shoes and borrowed hopes, boys who still carried questions in their posture, elders with folded arms and watchful eyes. Naomi didn't wear a power suit. She wore a sundress, and she spoke not from a podium, but from the floor level with the students. I grew up in a place where people expected me to serve quietly, she began, but I learned that silence isn't always dignity. Sometimes speaking your truth is the loudest form of love. She told them about scrubbing other people's floors, and the night she was accused, and the day she chose to rise anyway. You don't need to wait for someone to hand you a seat at the table, she said. Sometimes you build your own table, and when you do, leave room for others. When she finished, there wasn't thunderous applause. There was something better, a line of young people forming to speak to her one by one, not because they saw a celebrity, but because they saw hope. Naomi Carter didn't set out to be a hero. She set out to love a child, to do her job, to survive. But in doing so, she uncovered something greater, that justice lives in the daily decisions, that courage looks like standing still when others run, and that building a better world starts with believing you deserve to stand in it. She was no longer just a caretaker or a woman who'd been wronged or a symbol of resilience. She was an architect of trust, of change, of home. And this was the house she built with grace, with grit, and with her whole heart.